Recently, you're hearing a lot of people that are talking about like Minuteman stuff, militia stuff, and I've written a few articles. Some of them are a little bit redundant where I'm repeating myself, but trying to keep the subject fresh and add in any kind of details that I can think of. So, it's kind of a popular subject with a lot of people given the current environment, but I feel like a lot of this stuff is regurgitated, kind of like my articles are kind of regurgitated, where there's a lot of flaws. See, here's the way I see it. I see a lot of people that have good intentions. They want to be ready if they have like real tyranny where innocent people are being persecuted and possibly killed just for their beliefs. That's kind of the ultimate fear right now, and I get that. However, going about it in the way that people are doesn't really make sense. And what I'm talking about specifically is the type of training people think is going to prepare them to answer this problem. Kind of like militias typically are trying to do not. I wouldn't even say paramilitary. Like they really are just taking tactics from the military and implementing them, which is fine. It's very easy to do. However, there's a lot of things about that is just not going to work. And here's why. Technologically, you're behind. You are not going to have the same reason to implement those tactics that a formal military would. And what do I mean by that? Supporting arms. Do you have mortars? Do you have artillery? Do you have air support? The U.S. military is heavily dependent on all of those, and it actually is the reason why we are, it's kind of a slur, but it is not untrue that we today have a stand-up military, which means that when we walk on a security patrol, when we do a movement to contact, we're not trying to camouflage ourselves anymore. We're just walking along like it's World War I, walking to the enemy's position. And that's really what it is. We don't implement the art of camouflage much anymore in the military. It's mostly relying on the uniform and just hiding behind the bush, as it were. The biggest reason for that is you're relying on your supporting arms to make up that lack of camouflage and that lack of surprise. Surprise isn't as important as I think a lot of people think it is, as far as like, or surprise isn't really implemented as much as some people think it is. So realistically, a lot of the infantry tactics that are being used are relying on you actually having these different things: surprise and violence of action, understanding your terrain, being able to maneuver in microterrain and move in microterrain under fire. That's something that historically America has never really been good at until around Vietnam. And you had some specialized units that really learned from the Vietnamese, and even in World War II, the Japanese taught people some hard lessons. But America kind of has this learn and forget kind of issue going on. So today, the most camouflage that you'd see a lot of people doing is face paint. And that's not really doing all that much. They might paint their weapons and stuff, but we have a lot to go. So if you're going to be a civilian preparing to deal with maybe a conventional force, then maybe you need to look through history and, maybe instead of learning lessons the hard way like some did, don't be that stereotype of those who do not study history are bound to repeat it. Don't be that person. Study your history. Learn what people did in order to overcome larger threats. Like, for instance, in Vietnam, the Viet Cong and the NVA never had air superiority ever. They won. And they won several battles. And a lot of the claimed kills were not actually confirmed and couldn't be confirmed. And a lot of times, they couldn't be ambushed successfully. So that shows that they were very easily able to conquer their terrain. If you can't do that, if you can't blend in a crowd, if you can't kind of blend into your own terrain. Like if you live rurally, then that's a problem. That's something that you need to do, not just putting on a camouflage uniform and calling it good. Maybe you need to actually learn how to pick some vegetation and actually stick it on yourself and be able to maneuver. Do it slow, get tuned into your environment, work on your hearing, your recognition, your visual recognition of objects, stuff like that. These are important skills. Now, a lot of people are like, well, they weren't really good at that good at fighting. Okay, the Japanese, they were a professional military, and sometimes, well, a lot of times near the end, they were just pulling whoever they could, quickly training them up, and maybe sending them out. But a lot of times, it was just older units that were veteran units, and they would be put into combat. They had really devastating effects. Their ability to implement tactics, despite not having any air support, like in Iwo Jima, look at that. Look what happened in Iwo Jima. They were dug in, like Alabama ticks, as Jesse Ventura said. But it's true. They really were. It was an Alamo. So you can learn lessons from history. Now, some things that give you an advantage would be, right now you have the opportunity to get some amazing weapon skills. In different weapons. You can even learn about demolitions. You can learn about stuff that's a little bit outside your scope, but stuff that you could acquire, right? So you can learn how to take POWs, treat them humanely, and stuff like that, and learn how all that stuff works, or whatever. You can learn how to deal with an invasion, and you have all this knowledge at hand, but I feel like a lot of people just aren't taking it because they think that we're in some kind of moral category, like we're the best of the world. And realistically, America and most first world countries are so reliant on firepower, they're not really the best in the world at preventing themselves from being victims of firepower. Now, like the Taliban quite recently, they weren't exactly good marksmen, so they didn't really have very good weapon skills, but that wasn't their point. Their point was harassment and sabotage, and creating fear. It was terrorism on a large scale, countrywide, to make it to the point where when we finally pulled out, which we did, whether we yanked the cord slow or we yanked it fast, they were going to take over again. People were still scared enough of them, and they showed that they could reach out to anybody, that they were embedded. They were an insurgency. They could do assassinations and stuff, even with troops right down the street. As bad as it sounds, that might be the way to go. But with weapon skills and stuff, like, could you imagine if the Taliban that had ambushed us? I would not be alive if the Taliban had really good weapon skills. I can tell you that much, because the first firefight that I was in, I definitely had rounds snapping very close by, but none hit. So if they were really good with their weapons and they understood their zeros, their holds and everything, I probably would have been dead. Probably would have taken a headshot from an AK at 200 meters. But that's the beauty of weapon skills. So the next thing is tech. We do have the opportunity to have some technology, but formal military forces these days, pretty much around the world, have the ability to jam radios, jam cell phone signals. You just, even having it on airplane mode, they can jam your electronics. They can put a scrambler out that scrambles all electronics that run on different frequencies or whatever. It's actually happened during the, the January 6th event. They actually did scramble cell phone signals and radio signals and all this other stuff. They were just doing some stuff miles away, and they were running a test, and it scrambled cell phone signals. So, yeah, we do have tech, but we have access to night vision and thermal and stuff like that, but that's also stuff that can be acquired, right? But our ability to understand how to use it is something that we can get accustomed to now, and then you just have to worry about getting yourself loaded out with it. The next is tactics. You can learn the tactics now on how to deal with a partisan kind of situation, doing partisan warfare. You have the time, but how much people will commit to it is another thing. Like I said, those who do not study history are bound to repeat it, and those people that think, oh, well, I don't have time, I gotta go cuddle with the baby or spank the dog or whatever, they always make an excuse to not train, and that's fine, but this is just the reality here is you do have the opportunity to kind of set yourself up to feel good about yourself by preparing. And the other thing is culture. We do have a gun culture here. We do have a culture where, you know, we do want to be prepared. We want to be self-sufficient. And we kind of pride ourselves on being this kind of warrior culture. We're not really going about it the right way, I don't think, of seeing your situation for what it is and adapting to it accordingly. But does that mean you can't? No, absolutely not. So, I mean, I'm not encouraging any action one way or the other. Truthfully, I don't think people have the balls to actually do anything, because this is a slow fuse burning, and it's kind of like a cigarette just being left out. It's just slowly burning away, and the ash is just going to stick there because nobody's ashing. But I don't really think that there's really going to be much coming of this, because it's just going to be such a slow burn, and it's just going to be a bunch of micro nibbles. And that's really the way this country has been. So people are just going to get comfortable with their little blanket of tyranny. So it's just one thing at a time, 1% of tax at a time. And people just accept it, they complain about it, and then they get over it because they got to wake up and feed their family tomorrow. That's the reality of the situation. So the idea that everybody's going to just rise to the occasion just because of this, that, and the other, I don't think so. But, you know, those people that want to feel good about themselves, there's a way to prepare, and, you know, we can learn from history. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks a lot for watching, and yeah, you guys